So let us introduce ourselves and the topic at hand. As you may have seen from our outreach efforts, where this is the first part in the Resiliency Series put on by the Brain Injury Association of America and the Brain Injury Association Survivor Council. So my name is Greg Ayotte. I'm the Director of Consumer Services with the Brain Injury Association of America. Part of my responsibility is to respond to the requests that come in to the Brain Injury Association through our website, through our 800 line, or social media. We were going to have two folks joining us today. It was going to be, three. Myself and Angela, who's here, and Stacia Bissell, who was not able to make it due to an unforeseen family medical emergency. Our thoughts and prayers are with her and her family this time. We will have an opportunity at a later time to have her come on and share her experiences and insights.
She has such intelligent answers for this particular topic, so definitely. I do want her to share.
Definitely.
But we are holding her and her family in our prayers and thoughts.
So I thought I would introduce folks to Angela since she is here. So Angela has been a member of the Brain Injury Advisory Council since 2019, 11 years after she sustained a brain injury in a car crash that killed her husband. She's the subject of the book, Me Now, Who Next? And contributed a chapter to the Chicken Soup for the Soul for recovering from traumatic brain injuries. Angela's been active with the Brain Injury Association of New York State, was on their board of directors, was the chairwoman for the New York City chapter. So she is now in North Carolina. She said she lives with double vision, memory challenges, neurofatigue. She has participated in the Brain Injury Awareness Day in DC since 2009 and continues to be a fierce advocate for others living with brain injury.
Thanks, Greg.
Angela, we're so happy that you're here today. I know it's a little different than what we had planned and practiced.
It's probably going to be a shorter conversation. There's benefits to that.
That's okay. So the two questions I think we wanted to address, I'm going to say both the questions and we'll get back to talking about the first. Really, two issues maybe is accepting and celebrating the new you versus trying to return to the old you. And finding support or finding your people. This is something I said we get a lot of calls about on the 800 line where folks struggle. My experience has been that this is a process of recovery, that it is very natural, especially early on after the injury, to look back. That's who you were. That's who you know. Why wouldn't you look back and try to get back to that?
Right.
That's your, in your head, that's your baseline. So it's not a small thing to ask somebody to give that up and to turn and look forward to the unknown.
That's right. For me, what does acceptance mean? Acceptance is kind of a journey. There are some days when I wholly love myself, and there are others where I'm feeling pretty frustrated and confused. On those harder days, I try to just cut myself some slack. Maybe I'll sleep in longer or eat more. I always go to meditate. I believe acceptance is ever changing, like we are.
It's a really good point. I don't think it's right. It's not it's not a destination, it's a journey, right? It's never like, oh, okay, I've accepted myself, check, move on to the next. It's an ongoing kind of a process. When I know one of the things that we've talked about is that so most of the folks who have sustained a brain injury talk about how different they feel. So for you, in your experience, what about you feels different today versus before the injury? And how do you come to start to accept those changes, those differences?
I always use the analogy of A1 and A2. Angela 1 died on July 31st, 2008, and A2 was born that same night. A1 was the vice president of a top public relations firm in New York City. She was newly married and they had just bought their first home. A2 became a widow and still gets lost on the subways and sleeps a little more and moves more slowly. But she's a rock star. And I've recovered beyond my own expectations. Understanding these two versions of myself allows me to fully love and inhabit Angela.
So, so after your injury, did you try to return to the old you?
uh, when I returned to New York City, I felt like I had lost everything, including my identity. All my friends had moved on with their lives, and I really tried hard to slip back into my old routines, but I simply could not. The old shoes didn't fit anymore. I didn't have enough energy, enough organization, enough acceptance. The first few years felt devastating, exhausting, and pretty scary.
So how did you come to accept the new you? That's
Mm, mm. I consider July 31st my rebirth day or my second chance at life. In fact, today is my friend Phil in New York City's rebirth day. I've thrown myself some parties and try to celebrate what is otherwise a depressing day. They're not always big parties. Sometimes I've gotten together with a small group of friends to watch the sunset. This is a chance to come together and celebrate the small victories. We can't change what happened. However, we can change how we feel about the person we've become.
so I think certainly in the conversations I've had with folks is that the as we said, it's a journey and not a destination. So it's
Right.
not a I think folks want to be able to turn forward and never look back. And I don't think you can do that. I don't think you can
Mm-mm.
turn off that part of yourself. It
Mm-mm.
will always be part of yourself
Mm-hmm.
you were before the injury. And
That
certainly
past is what makes us who we are today.
parts of
We
that
have to
still
express a great deal of gratitude for the whole journey because this right here and now is made up of all of it.
yeah. And that's I think it's a hard thing to help people do. You can't do it for them, right? This is a process they have to figure out for themselves. But I
Right.
think helping them understand this is part of the recovery process. It's healthy to want to look back, to want to try to get back to your old self, to look at, in my head, as you're looking back at it, you're trying to figure out kind of what parts of you are still there and what are not. Like what are the pieces of the puzzle that I still have to work with, and what do I need to figure out how to fill in? And that's not a small task to ask of anybody.
Yeah.
Never mind someone that's struggling, right, with fatigue or cognition or emotional
Memory.
memory. So definitely a challenge.
Mm.
So that certainly leads to the second big issue: finding your people. Finding your people.
I'm
So,
going to model my support group t shirt one more time. These are some of my people.
how did you find your people?
I am grateful for my strong brain injury advocate here in North Carolina. Karen Keating in the house. She reached out to my family weeks after the crash, and actually, when I moved back, she gave me a ride to my first support group here in Asheville. It was the beginning of a beautiful, long friendship, and Karen helped me on my path to becoming an advocate. Her influence followed me from North Carolina to New York, and then back to North Carolina again. She helped me find both tribes in both cities. The brain injury support group here in Asheville, I call my tribe because the members have really become family to me. I'd like to give both my New York City and Asheville tribes shout outs.
So obviously, you chose to participate in the brain injury support groups, and so were those something that did you know that they were your people when you started?
Mm. Um, I had so many questions and felt so confused at the beginning of my healing journey. I felt comfortable in this room full of strangers who understood my challenges themselves. I felt like questions were being heard and answered. I got so much support out of them early on that I now return to offer support for others.
Yeah, paying it forward. I think that's another a big part of the healing journey as well. So for somebody that's just starting this process, how do you know if this support group is right for you? How do you know if that's the right fit?
I've experienced a few support groups, and I'm sure some of you out there have too, that felt more like gripe sessions, which wasn't for me. It's always important that we feel comfortable in support group settings. So feel free to reach out and try different groups in order to find the one that fits you best. Maybe give it a second chance before deciding it's not for you.
That's a really good point. So I've tried to talk to a lot of folks who they went to a support group, had a bad experience, and it was just a bad group. Like it was just that night, someone was going through a crisis and was
Mhm.
maybe
Mhm.
all they were doing is talking about themselves. And
Right.
that's not normally how the group operates. So I always kind of recommend like go to a few and see if is it
That-
a pattern? Does this happen over and over? Is it a one off? What's the vibe like? Does it feel like you said, do you feel comfortable in the room?
Yeah. When I
Right.
was in New York City, I was kind of working the support group
The
circuit.
live circuit.
Yeah, I
The
was going to
ones.
the states support group. Mount Sinai had a really cool women's support group. That was super cool. I'm a patient of NYU Langone. I was there, and I think they had a support group. So I was just working the circuit. More people to meet, more friends. I just felt comfortable,
That's a really
and
good
encourage you to try it too.
point. Try different ones. Try different groups. There's nothing that says you can only go to one group.
That's right.
There's no
That's
law.
right.
No law about that. So the other piece that I've seen, I'm going to go off script a little bit, but the other piece I've seen is the growth of online groups, certainly with COVID and people
Right. Yeah.
moving virtual. There's pluses and minuses to it. Obviously,
Yeah.
being in the room with somebody, being able to connect and converse and have that conversation, there is no substitute.
Right. That's
If
right.
if that's not available, the next best thing is a virtual group because you're still, in my head, the way I've heard it described to me, what I've seen happen over and over is that when you are talking to people that get it, when it comes to, you don't have to explain the brain injury part to get to the other stuff.
Right. That's
You
right.
don't have to spend that energy explaining all that. When you are in the room with people that get it, that can make a big difference.
Hmm. Hmm.
Being
And there
able
are some opportunities like there's a statewide North Carolina
to,
support group. I wouldn't be able to attend that. I think it's out of Raleigh or something, but there's a really cool brain injury writers group that's all virtual. I wouldn't be able to do the story I'll tell led by Shanice Martin. I wouldn't be able to participate in that if it weren't on screen. So yes, there is something to be said about being in person. There's certainly, and a lot of folks have tech challenges, and the ability to get on a screen isn't always
right.
accessible possible for folks, but if it is possible for you, that's a great option alternative for
Um,
support group support.
so the next question, this is the biggie in my head.
Mm,
How do you handle the family and friends who don't understand the injury, who don't
mm,
really offer too much support?
mm, mm. I can't expect support from those who don't understand brain injuries themselves. So the onus is on me to educate and help grow awareness and understanding. This is an invisible injury, so I look the same, but I'm certainly different. When I was discharged from Helen Hayes Hospital in New York, I hardly understood my own changes. So, my neuropsychologist from NYU Langone helped me create a training program called TBI 101. This allowed me to explain my differences and establish ground rules in a clinical setting. Here are two examples from that training. One, don't say remember when, because it's likely I will not, and that will make me sad of the memory loss. Two, provide cues versus volunteering answers. If you notice me forgetting something like an umbrella on a rainy day, help me practice remembering by saying, are you sure you have everything? I offered this TBI 101 to my mom and my boyfriend at the time, and we all found greater understanding.
Those are great ideas. I think sometimes folks want to jump in and solve the problem thinking they're being helpful, but it's kind of keeping you from relearning a skill or remastering a skill, being able to practice those cognitive skills and
That's right.
give yourself a moment to think about what do I need before I leave? Stop and think. Yeah. But those are really helpful suggestions. Um, I will also add that there can be a point where you have to stop trying,
Mm-hmm.
right? So certainly we get those calls where the the information is not changing the attitudes of the family, right? You're
Mm-hmm.
trying to share info about it. So I just want to kind
Mm-hmm.
of validate that for folks who are experiencing it.
Mm-hmm.
You may be giving the exact right message, great information.
Mm-hmm.
If the other person's not willing or able to listen and receive that info, you will
Mm-hmm.
not change their minds.
That's right. And Greg, I want to debunk the lie that we've all been told. Everyone in this Facebook Live who's tuned in has all been told the same lie by our medical team that we will max out at 1 year. Come
And
on. I'm still improving. And it's how many years ago? 15 years? Um, so growth and healing, and mainly because I'm learning new strategies. I'm learning how to live better with this brain injury. My relationship with this injury and myself is always improving and changing. And yes, I understand I don't believe there's a ceiling or a plateau, but you might approach a situation where you say, I challenge that, Greg. I don't think you should give up. I don't think you should stop trying. Um, I don't think there really is a plateau. If you see one and you allow there to be one, fine, there will be a plateau. But if you continue to try, continue to ask questions, continue to ask for support, you'll be surprised by how far you continue to go.
yes, most definitely. So, yeah, the timetable for recovery or improvement or changes for better or for worse is not ended a year. So, I always tell folks, I'm like, brain injury doesn't happen in a bubble. So all the things that as we get older, our cognition changes, our attitude change, our personality, like we can, so you have a choice and control over how that happens. If you're aware of it, if you're choosing to take good care of yourself, if you're
That's right.
choosing good mental health, like, so those things don't end, change, or any different, brain injury or no brain injury. So there's a uh, there's a limit to what you can do, but there's not an end, right? So
That's right.
yeah, so
I agree.
it can definitely be challenging. So for the I had somebody ask if I would bring this point up and just to make sure I validate it for folks. For the folks who don't who are struggling with family members or loved ones understanding the injury, don't waste energy trying to change their minds.
Right. Right.
For what I always tell folks is kind of like all you can do is plant seeds and see
That's
what grows,
right.
right? So
Yeah.
you're
Yeah.
sharing info on when there's moments you feel like it's an opportunity to share information.
Yeah.
Um, Getting information from other places like us. So if we share information with a family member, we're considered experts.
That's right.
So there's some level of, well, they're saying it, so it could be true.
Right. I don't know that the TBI 101 would have been as effective if it wasn't in a clinical setting. It
Hmm.
was a doctor, and she's a pro, and so she helped guide the conversation.
Hmm.
Um, so whenever possible, if okay, to your earlier point, Greg, and I learned this a long time ago in a spiritual class. It's none of my business what anyone else thinks about me.
Oh,
Let's
that,
think about that. Let's think about that. It's none of my business what anyone else thinks about me.
yeah.
And that was really hard for me to get my head around. But really, we as you said earlier, we can provide the information, we can plant the seeds, but we can't control the growth.
Oh,
We can't control the awareness, the understanding. Um, we can control our own. And Stacy was planning on sharing this on her side. She has really healthy boundaries, and myself included. And so when we feel that someone's not respecting our boundaries or hearing us, then we have the ability to. I mean, some of my friends in New York City, um, there came a natural departure of that friendship. We just had different
hmm,
priorities and different things on our plates, and a lot of um, friendships might be changed or lost. And there, part of me is sad about that, but the other part is um, going back to acceptance that just moving on.
yeah, definitely. I mean, we know that happens naturally, anyways, right? As you go through, like your friendships will change over time, anyways, right?
Hmm.
Like I said, different priorities, different focus, whatever it might be. So being able to see that for what it is, right, and not put energy into something that's not getting any return can definitely be.
Right, that's right.
It's very, it drains you.
It's exhausting.
Yeah, sure, definitely. All right. So, how do you know? Last question. What medical or clinical support? How do you know what support to get? What clinical support to get? What medical?
Mm.
How do you?
Mm.
How do you start to figure that out?
Hmm. I took advice from people who have experience with brain injury.
Mm.
As I was completing rehab here in North Carolina, I attended a conference where I met Lee Woodruff, the wife of reporter Bob Woodruff, who also sustained a TBI. When I returned to New York, I followed her recommendation and found Dr. Stephen Flanagan,
Oh
who
yeah,
specializes in brain injury rehabilitation in where you Lincoln. So I find getting answers from people who know it themselves is a good place to start.
definitely. Talking to people who have been there, right? Yeah. Where, and I'll put a caveat just based on my experience. What might have worked for them might not work for you, right?
Fair
So
enough.
don't feel
True.
like, but
True.
you start talking. See, it's been my experience. Is what I always tell folks to do. Is that if you're working with a professional, they don't seem to be the right fit.
Right.
Ask them who they think you should see. Like they're
Mhm.
in that world. Like
Yeah.
you,
Yeah.
you're the expert.
Yeah.
What do you think would be a better fit? Where
And
do
the
you
thing
see?
is, folks, we are not victims. We are empowered to make our own clinical decisions. And so when I moved to North Carolina, I interviewed my medical team. Um, because each person has a different, to your earlier point, chemistry and relationship with, and every brain injury doctor, we should strive to have a healthy,
Mhm.
solid relationship with that person. So that's what guided me to finding my medical supports here in North Carolina.
That's good. It's a good idea. It's a great suggestion. We had a question from the chat. I'm going to ask if there are other resources outside of support groups
Ah,
that have helped you find the new you.
uh-huh.
Any other things that you have found to be particularly useful?
Great question. Well, I'm pretty involved in my spiritual center, Unity of the Blue Ridge. I take classes there. Um, and I'm a member of their women's group. What other than support groups?
Support groups. I don't know if there's anything.
Uh,
So, I mean, I'll just say from my experience, just talking to other folks.
Yeah.
Sometimes one of the reasons why we're doing these things is seeing the conversation, seeing other people, and hearing what
Yes.
their experience has been. That
Yes.
can be helpful.
Yes.
Sometimes reading the stories of others,
Yes.
if it resonates with you, like hearing how they kind of processed, and you'll pick up. But I was talking like you will never find a book that speaks exactly to you. So
Right.
take what you need, leave the rest, right? So just you can find nuggets certainly that way. So
Yeah.
um, and then so sometimes some of the online groups like Facebook groups,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
groups like that, like
There are a
again,
ton of Facebook brain injury support groups.
getting
Or
some info or some
hmm
feedback or
resources.
just some suggestions, because you're
Hmm
no one's going to lay your path up for you. All you just want are some breadcrumbs.
Right. Right. And
Let's
I also have a psychologist. Is he a, I don't know what his exact title is, but um, we'll talk about much more than just brain injury and he definitely helps me navigate some of the trickier, stickier spots in my life that aren't necessarily related to brain injury. And I feel having that additional professional guidance and advice can be very, very helpful.
that definitely can be helpful. Yeah, definitely.
You're so popular, Greg.
I am.
You're so
It's
popular.
amazing. So we had another question that was asked: are there training classes for caretakers? Are there ways for caregivers to better understand the injury?
Mm. There was at one time a caregiver brain injury support group here in the Asheville area. I don't believe that's still coming together since COVID kind of dissembled. But that's a really great question. Greg, do you have any suggestions?
A lot of times I'll say, yeah, a lot of times the support groups sometimes will be mixed caretakers and survivors, and then they'll split up.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay, so sometimes, and then there's some that are just totally just for caregivers. So I would certainly look for that, hearing from others um, and their experiences. So if folks are looking for more like, I don't know, clinical, for lack of a better term, this
And the
training.
question asks for a class, which is brilliant.
Yeah.
That's just brilliant.
So there are training materials. I think for some of the states have them, and there's a few things. I will reach out to this person outside of here and see if I can't figure out how to get some suggested resource or information to them. There are some
Cool.
good training materials and resources that are out there to help families understand it a little better. Um, and certainly, I always tell folks, find a support organization in your state, whatever it might be. Just talking to others that get it, getting information that's relevant to your situation can be a big difference.
Yeah.
So I don't have any other. Do we have any other final words of wisdom or thoughts or comments or suggestions or to end on?
I just want to throw out another prayer for Stacia that she and her family move through this medical emergency with as much grace as possible. And I look forward to her sharing her answers on this topic soon.
Most definitely, most definitely. So for folks that may be watching now or watch this as a recording, you guys are always welcome to contact the Brain Injury Association of America through our 800 line, through our website, um, looking for resources or information. If we have it, we will send it to you. Also,
Would you like to offer the 800 website now? Just
yeah,
throw it.
1-800 444 6443. And go to our YouTube page. Our Brain Injury Association of America has a YouTube page where we have this will be available, as well as other recordings are available as well.
Mhm.
Hopefully, there can be some useful insights and suggestions and resources there as well. Angela, thank you for coming on and being
Thank you for
flexible.
having me on.
Thanks for being flexible. I know this is not what we had planned for. Again, yeah, thoughts and prayers definitely with Stacia. And
I shared with Stacia, my prayer partner told me, blessed are the flexible because they won't get bent out of shape.
I like that a lot. So thank you, folks, for joining us today. As always, contact us if you have questions. Thanks,
Thanks,
everybody.
you guys.
Have a great day.
Bye.